Here it is, guys. Swing out rear bumper in its final form. I'm just so excited. I couldn't resist showing you guys this thing right off the bat. I've been running it for about 2 weeks. It is rock solid. The spare doesn't move around. It doesn't make any noise. It doesn't clang. It doesn't wiggle. It just works. And frankly, I'm proud of it. So, this will be the last video. I'm going to show you the final touches and the final steps to getting this thing from the shop, where you've seen it for the last 2 videos, onto my truck. And that'll include things like building the mounting arms that'll interface with the frame, prepping the truck frame itself, adding some plating, painting, installing a locking pin, installing a license plate light, and various other final touches that, get this thing in the state you see it now. But anyway, I'm not going to do a long intro this time. Let's finish this thing off. Alright guys, it is time to finish off this bumper, and the very first thing I'm going to do is build the arms that mount the bumper box tube to the frame of my truck. These are the mounting arms. And to do that, I'm using 3/8 thick plain carbon steel, so it's very thick plate, and I'm going to get a lot of stiffness out of it, which is important if I use the bumper, if I use the recovery points on the bumper, or if I run it into anything. I want a lot of stiffness through these mounting arms. And I need a little bit of a funky shape to them because I need to hold the bumper slightly lower than the box on the back of my truck. I need to clear that sheet metal that makes up the box. And I also wouldn't be able to open the tailgate if I kept the bumper at the same level as the top of the frame rail. So I need to hold it just a little under to make sure I can still actually use the tailgate. So to make those little angled cuts, I just used a vertical bandsaw, and now I'm clamping the 2 arms together and kind of cleaning up any asymmetries between the 2 pieces with a flap wheel. It's kind of an eyeball method, but it'll be perfectly fine for what I'm doing. And then I'm throwing them on the mill just to take out any waves in those cuts, make them nice and even and symmetric. Clean up that face, and then I'm cleaning up the actual mounting face where those will get welded to the bumper box tube. And then I'm going to mill the slots in these mounting arms. I'm creating slots because I want adjustment forward, backward, and the radius is going to be a little bit bigger than the 1/2-inch bolts I'm using, so I can actually adjust the bumper up and down too, and I can get everything all nicely aligned to the body and frame and make it look nice. And I'm just stacking the arms on top of each other and milling the slots through both arms at once. And it takes a little longer, but it worked pretty well. Nice little satisfying cleanup clip. Beautiful. And then we're going to flash over to my truck here, where I'm going to cut off the old box tube. Now this box tube was actually welded to the frame of my truck. I just very quickly hacked this piece of box tube on there with a couple of square tube chunks that weld to the inside of the frame rails, and it is all just very gross and sloppy, and it got me an inspection sticker, but man, I hated it the whole time I had it on there. I did it so fast. I think I did it in a couple hours one night. So I'm using a Sawzall here to just cut through those square tube arms. It's fighting me a little bit. I think I just got that one. And then the other side, I didn't want to quite cut it all the way off just so it didn't fall on me. But yeah, it was a little bit of a fight getting that Sawzall in there and just going to town. And you can see here, I almost get, yep, there goes the bumper. It's starting to lean down, so I stop, wiggle it a little bit, see if it's going to fall. Then I'm going to creep out from under it and cut the last little piece. And there she goes. Beautiful. You can see those square tube pieces, which I'm now going to cut off with an angle grinder and then cut it back to the ends of the frame rails. There was some nice sloppy weld in there that I needed to reach in there with a Sawzall and take out. Do the other side here. It was all just gross. I'm really embarrassed of this thing, but it's gone now, and that makes me happy. To actually mount the bumper to the frame, I did not want to rely on the stock bumper mounting points because I personally think they are too few and too small. I think the hardware is too small for me to want to rely on it for serious off-road use. So what I'm going to do to remedy that is I'm actually going to add some exterior plating to the C-channel. I'm just putting it on the outside of the C-channel, and these little plates that I've made, that I didn't show you guys, sorry, have 4 half-inch clearance holes for half-inch 13 grade 8 hardware. And so I'm just going to tack these plates on, both driver's side and passenger side, and then I'm going to take a drill, stick it in those clearance holes I've already made, and then drill some holes through the frame itself so I have new mounting points. And I'm actually going to have not 4 but 6 mounting points per side. These plates have 4, as you can see, and then I'm adding 2 more holes further up the frame where I've already made a more rugged cross member that hold my shackle hanger. So I'm actually going to drill a couple of holes through the box tubes that are on either side of that cross member, and that's going to give me 2 more mounting points through what is already a very strong weldment, and therefore I have essentially 6 extremely strong mounting points that can handle a lot of abuse. And the best part about all of this is that I will not be questioning whether or not my bumper can actually take real-world heavy off-road usage. This thing will hold up. And so here I'm finish welding some of the exterior plating. I'm just running an uphill bead here. I hate running uphill weld beads. Getting better at it, but man, it sucks. And just running continuous beads on all sides. These actually turned out pretty well. I took a flap wheel to the face of the plating just to make sure that those arms would sit flush against it and wouldn't run into any sort of little weld protrusion that I might have. But overall, I left the welds alone afterward. And here I'm just adding a little bit of plating where I've drilled those 2 holes through the box tube of the cross member. And this is mostly to act as a spacer. It's just got a big clearance slot in it, so the arms will sit against it as it does, or as they do on the plating further back on the frame. Now we're moving back to the bumper. It's time to put those bumper mounting arms on. And the first thing I have to do is take some of the weld bead down, or take all of the weld bead down on the back side that is already on the toe points. If you remember in the first video, I put those toe points all the way through the box tube, and so I needed to take that weld bead off. And then I'm going to use a couple of 90-degree magnets to set up the bumper mounting arms exactly where I want them, and hold them nice and perpendicular to the rear face of that bumper. And then I'm just going to tack them on. I'm going to put a lot of tacks here because I want to try to minimize the warping at the end of these mounting arms. Any sort of warping out or in will be very visible at the very end because it's a long cantilevered piece. Then I'm adding some gusseting too, and that'll help a lot with preventing the warpage. These gussets are also made of 3/8 plate, so they're very thick. And the whole setup is just, as I've said it before, it's just gonna be really beefy and very stiff. After it was all tacked together, I drove the bumper back to the shop and I'm burning it all in. I'm running continuous beads here with a circular torch pattern and very hot machine settings to try to maximize the weld penetration I get. I just want these welds to be as strong as I can possibly make them, and I think they all turned out really, really nicely. And then after a test fit that I didn't show you guys, I am finally ready to paint all the components of this bumper swing out combo. I'm using Rust-Oleum products because, well, for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm kind of a cheapskate and I wanted to do this on the cheap. The whole point of doing this whole bumper myself was not only to learn, but to keep the cost down. And that includes paint. But I also really like Rust-Oleum products. I think that for the money, especially, they work really, really well. They're super easy to touch up. The finish is pretty tough with all their enamels, which I'm using here. I just used a filler primer, and now I'm using a flat black enamel. And but yeah, I'm a big Rust-Oleum fan. I know people use fancy paints, Eastwood and Steal It and whatever, and I've used it too, but I always come back to Rust-Oleum. I'm never disappointed with how it turns out, and it's really easy to put on too, which is a big plus. It's hard to mess up. You can get it to run if you start laying it really heavy, but if you know what you're doing, or even if you don't, it's pretty easy to get a good finish out of Rust-Oleum. You just you know, make sure the conditions are right, lay it on per the instructions on the can, and you're going to come out with a pretty nice paint finish. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time to actually mount this whole thing up. And this is a bit of a fight because I'm by myself, I don't have any help, and so I put it on a little Tupperware storage container, and I'm trying to just wedge it up in there, and I'm like humping it on there. It was not a pretty sight, but it fit really tightly, which is exactly what I wanted. The arms have just enough clearance to kind of slide over that plating, but there's no real slop. And I like that. I like a little bit of friction in there. So number one, it makes it easier to assemble by myself. Number two, there's no real slop. I don't need to bend anything when I'm clamping these bolts down. So here I'm going to put 4 of the 6 bolts in. Just using flanged head, hex head hardware, grade 8, with some big grade 8 nuts on the back side. Using the old adjustable to hold the flanged nuts while I crank it from the back side with a ratchet. Then I'm going to mount the end caps. Here is the hinge side, and if you guys remember, each of these end caps is held on by 4 1/2" 13 grade 8 bolts that thread into weld nuts on the inside of the bumper box tube. So I'm just going to thread those in, torque them down pretty hard with a ratchet. I'm not measuring the torque, but you know, I put a pretty good torque on them because I definitely do not want any of them loosening. I put a little Loctite on them too. But these end caps are removable, which I really like as a feature, just in case I want to take the swing out off and just run the box tube. Here's the latch side, just cranking all those bolts down one by one, putting a pretty good torque on them. Then I'll install the hinge itself. Just slide it right into that bent C bracket, run that huge 3/4" bolt through there, and then just use the old adjustable to put enough torque on it that feel like it's well aligned and has the correct swing resistance. I'm also installing this little swing out support pad made out of steel, and the swing out sits on this when it's closed, and it just stands it off from the top face of the bumper just a little bit. It mounts with a couple of 1032 flathead screws and is just a nice little feature. And then time to install the swing out. It's decently heavy, so you can see I'm struggling here just a little bit. And with the paint finish, everything fit a little bit tighter than it originally did. But I don't mind. Just muscle it around a little and get it into place. Came in without too much struggle. And then I'll just run these 3/4" hex head bolts through the hinge bracket. And then I'm using a special, very thin lock nut on the back side of each of those bolts just to create maximum clearance for when it's locked at 90 degrees, that I won't hit those lock nuts, oops, hit the camera, with my tailgate. And then it had gotten pretty late at that point, so begrudgingly I waited until the next morning to actually put the spare tire on the swing out. Here I am mounting it up. It's decently heavy, so it took some effort to get up on there, but man, what a feeling after all this work to get that thing on there and to get those lug nuts tightened down, just have it all mounted up after working on this bumper forever. It was a really, really great feeling. So I just threw 3 lug nuts on there, cranked them down, figured that'd be enough for now at least, and man, I was just really excited. And you'll be able to tell by my stoic face right there how incredibly excited I am. One of the last steps is to get this locking pin, this spring locking pin on the swing out, to be able to lock it at approximately 90 degrees and then a little more. There's one more locking position. I waited to do this until everything was assembled because I wanted to ensure I had tailgate clearance, but just measured that out, threw some welds on there, and we were good to go. And then the very last step I'm going to show you guys is installing this little LED license plate light I got off Amazon. I actually got a 2-pack of these. They're just a little generic license plate light. And I'm going to install this by drilling a couple of mounting holes on the box tube of the swing out. I'm going to tap the holes to an 832 thread size, and I'll just thread the hardware directly into the box tube, and I should get plenty of thread engagement to handle this almost weightless little LED light, and it'll make it really convenient to install. So I'll just run that in and then line up the little light and run the hardware in. I'm just using black oxide coated stainless steel hardware. Should hold up just fine to the elements. And I'm going to splice this light into the running lights of my truck harness. I'm just going to solder splice. Essentially just use a lineman splice, throw some solder on it, and put some heat shrink on it. And that's plenty sealed. And I added a couple little zip tie mounts so that I can tie this cable off in a way that it won't get pinched when I close the swing out. And that's what it looks like all mounted. And I'll light it up here. And that's it, guys. The bumper is done. Building this bumper has been a lot of fun, and I'm so excited and relieved that it's finally on the truck. All that's left to do now is to put it to the test in the woods and see how it does. Guys, I can't thank you enough for following along and supporting this project, and now that it's done, let me know what you think of it in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video series, consider throwing me a like and subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and get psyched because I have a lot more projects coming up. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you soon.